Welcome to Sankofa Hillside Ancestry, our workshop that's presented and hosted by me, Dr. Wead Kimbrough. I happen to be the genealogist facilitator of Good Genes Genealogy Services. As we begin today's workshop that deals with our customized ancestry results, it's part 2 of bringing your computers, whether you're a Zoom viewer or whether you're right here in person with us at Hillside in Atlanta. We just want to make sure that we can answer some of your questions while you're looking up information. But first, today we're going to present some ideas and some tips on how you can locate your ancestors who have been perhaps institutionalized in various locations, and also those who are in schools and other locations that seem to be sometimes far away from us. So let's get started and talk about what we want to talk about today. So we're finding our ancestors in institutions, and we think of jails and prisons, but also we have universities and schools, including one of the HBCUs that's pictured here that has been all but forgotten in Texas. And down below there is a large church school. It's really a church. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But in those locations, we're able to locate our ancestors who have been a part of major institutions. So here's a little bit of friendly advice, because there's something about talking about our ancestors who may have been in prison and in other institutions. And my advice is sometimes the stories of these disappeared ancestors or unexplained absences from our families turn out to involve incarceration. And in those cases, just be gentle and know that the stories that come out and the people who talk about it, and even yourself in receiving the information, be gentle with yourself. So start with what you know. Who among your ancestors may have been institutionalized? Just think about that. And the examples that I'm going to give you on the next slides are, you can check newspapers. Newspapers have proven to be a great source of information in terms of giving stories and giving clues as to where ancestors may have ventured. There are mugshot collections. You can also check the pardons and clemency records. There's the Freedmen's Bureau records, always there for you. These records are available on the traditional websites that I've referenced, Ancestry.com, Family Circle, Fold 3, etc. These are available to you. So let's look at some newspapers, and they'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So here, we have a lot of ancestors, perhaps, who may have participated in some type of, whether they were involved in the disturbances that occurred following the death of Dr. King in 1968. So this particular article may give some of you a clue as to where ancestors of yours may have ended up, if they don't end up on census records, or maybe they've just kind of fallen off what seems like the face of the earth. These articles can kind of give you a hint. For example, there were some disturbances in Wilmington, Delaware, New York City, Cincinnati, my hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, where I grabbed this clip, Buffalo, New York. And it'll tell you, it doesn't give you the name of the people, but it'll tell you about how many persons were involved. So always look at newspapers as possibly a hint that can get you into an institution's records. And here is the record of a gentleman whose name is Charlie Van. He was institutionalized actually in New Orleans. And when you look at, this is an Ancestry.com record, if you look at Charlie, you'll find out that he was charged with drunkenness. And so if you go to his actual record here on the second page, if you can read the writing, and we can pull it in, and if you pull it up, you can actually see it a little clearer. You'll see that it gives you a description of what occurred and the length of time and other kinds of little tidbits that these institutions provide. So in 1880, something happened. The U.S. Federal Census produced its first supplemental schedule, and they captured special populations, and it was called Dependent, Defective, and Delinquent Classes. While we may be opposed to these words, these were the words that were used for a few censuses. Every 10 years they evaluated certain classes of people. The insane people were considered idiots. Very interesting. We know deaf mutes, blind individuals, paupers, and indigent persons, homeless children. Very interesting. I guess they were delinquents, and prisoners. These were individuals who were captured on the census. The federal government, state governments were paying for the housing and care of these individuals. So if you are unable to locate some of your ancestors, they very well may be captured on this special census. I know that I've found more than a couple of our group's ancestors in these categories. When I wasn't able to find them in different locations where they should have been, I did find some of them in institutions other than their homes and hospitals. So here are a few examples of where you can find these ancestors that are not on the traditional census rolls. The New York Prison Registers is just one major source. It is a very good source. I've also used the Pennsylvania prison source records because of the ancestors that I have who might have been involved in some interesting conflicts. And the Georgia State Convict Records. Georgia was very well known in a not so good way for its chain gangs. So those records, a lot of individuals rotated through Georgia, and those records are very important. And again, many are on Ancestry.com, Family Search, and state archives. Even the National Registry, they also have this information. And I will tell you that Family Search doesn't have as accessible of records as one would think. So here's an example of an individual that I know who was actually in a Pennsylvania prison, and it was called the Pennsylvania Prison Reformatory and Workhouse, the records, and it was for Anna Mae Green. And in this particular instance, it will give you the name of the individual, the age of the individual, it's in the second column here, and then it will also give you more information about, whether black, white, male, female. It'll give you the charge. And when you get to these charges, because they were many, many, many ways antiquated, you may have to do, as I've had to do, go and look up what the charges mean, because they just have the abbreviations, and that will tell you a lot about them. It'll tell you the date that the individuals were brought in, what their sentence length time was, 90 days, 6 days, 1 year, etc. And you can't really see it, but in this particular case, it'll tell you that the individual either chose to do the hard time labor or not. So in many states and counties kept detailed prison intake registers or ledgers. So if you're looking for an individual, begin with their name. Don't leave out the aliases. You can even look them up by their ages. Sometimes their physical descriptions are used to check them in, and their crimes and sentences if you think you know. Again, going back to the defective, dependent, and delinquent cases, this is a result. I just picked a name, Caroline Jones, because I knew that name was very popular during that time. And this record here, I wanted to point out to you, and I know I'm going back to the 1880 federal census schedules, that this record shows it all. It shows that there was a recording of homeless children, the insane, I believe idiots, yes, they're on here as well, deaf mutes, paupers. This is just a record. When you click on, when you depress one of these, it will give you the additional information. This is all across the United States. Some are in Georgia, Massachusetts, New York, Texas, and it's a wide range of records for individuals. And it even tells you in this case that this person was being held in a private home at the public's expense. So let's talk about Georgia, because Georgia, as I said before, has a very interesting history in terms of its chain gang. One of the reasons why individuals were found on chain gangs is because of the banning of alcohol. So in 1907, became the first state in the South to pass this statewide ban on the production, transportation, and sale of alcohol. There were a lot of arrests made and imprisonments made because individuals were said to be using the alcohol or drinking alcohol, probably moonshine and other types of alcohol, outside of what the bounds of the law allowed. So this went on for several years, and it was finally repealed, but it certainly cost a lot of individuals their time in prison. And as this record shows, this is just one person. This is the name from my family. It's not necessarily that person, but it shows that George Anderson was arrested for violating the Liquor Control Act that Georgia had passed. And he was 46 years old, and he was confined to an institution. The record is there, and I did an overlay. I actually clicked on here the view record, and this view record is what we're seeing here. So all around George Anderson's highlighted record, you'll see the date that individuals were received at the institution where they served, and it shows their approximate date of birth, their race, and there were equally a number of Caucasians as there were Black individuals who were, in Georgia at least, who were arrested and did time for violating the Liquor Control Act. So again, Ancestry is a good source, Family Search, Fold 3, which has the military prison records. There were a few of us who were involved in skirmishes while we were military officers. And if you're not able to locate them, please refer to military prison records because they just may be there. And we've had some individuals in our group who have not been able to locate their loved ones who were in the military and just kind of dropped off again, that face of the earth. So that was just kind of breezing through the ancestry results for the attempts that you may take and you may have for those that are largely incarcerated and in other institutions. So I want to move now quickly to how we can access school records, something that I love because there's so much to talk about with school records. I'm able to locate mine from my elementary school days and especially high school days. So our ancestors' records are available, and I'll give you some ideas here. So find your ancestors in schools, and here are some ideas. There are and there have been attendance and enrollment registers, and it does show the names, the ages, the grades, the parents, guardians, the addresses. There are report cards that you might be able to locate, which will give you an indication of where they were in school, what their grades were, etc. Here's something that is particular to Black individuals, African Americans, those of us from the diaspora, churches. I was not able to locate. I knew that my great-grandfather was a teacher. I wasn't able to locate where he was teaching. And then one day as I was going through my genealogy workshops and in training, a spark came, and it was that probably he was teaching in a church, and it was true. In Helena, Arkansas. So many of our schools began in church basements. And don't forget that when you're looking for an individual, and especially if you know if he or she's a teacher, you can find your ancestors in yearbooks. That is a large source for me to find ancestors in yearbooks. Graduation programs, class lists, teacher registers. If you can find a roll book, and sometimes you can find it from Wiki or just in a Google search or any other search. Now, I've used the school census records. Many states, as it says here, did those separately. So I've gone back to the Omaha public school system, and they have a historical reference to those records. Very interesting and very helpful. And also, you don't forget about the PTA, any local education association publications. The school districts would publish major journals, and I know I was featured in one when I was in high school. I wrote a story about a janitor, and it was a unique story about this particular janitor. And during the snowy months, she still carried on her task, but she would come to school every day in her sandals, and she had socks and stockings, but it was just a very interesting process. So there are publications. You can find ancestors. Maybe they were writers. Newspaper articles about school events are always available. Newspapers are great sources. And finally, I have found even sports programs. There were high school football games were and still are very popular, and there are these programs that will list ancestors who were either, cheerleaders, football players, and sometimes the others were sponsors of those programs, and you can find their businesses on the back cover, front cover. It's just a lot of fun finding school records. So here's what I recommend you do to begin. First, go to the census records and just peek at them to see if the individual you're looking for is able to, and they have every single census will indicate whether they're able to read, or write, and some will indicate whether they attended school. That's really, really important because that lets you know that there was an opportunity for you to find school records. Then you can find the school. Now, sometimes they're a little difficult, but if you have the conversations with individual or if you just look nearby, that might give you a clue. And again, don't forget the churches, because churches also served as schools. And then you can get the demographic information. So I have an arrow pointing here of my Aunt Beverly, an ancestor. She is in the Central High School Girls Glee Club. There were so many things I learned about her activities as I was researching her as an ancestor. And there she is. A picture of her is so cool because you see she always had a little style to her, and that was a very pleasing thing to see and to learn. So when you want to keep searching for those school records, again, don't forget about those local districts and county education offices. They really do keep archives of older enrollment records. I've found them as far back as my dad attending school, 1940s, early 40s. And I found some that were even late 1890s, 1888 was one, as a matter of fact. Individual schools maintain their own archives. That's just a big deal for schools. They really want to make sure that they keep records of their alumni. That's a natural. Individual schools do this, but also collective schools, such as a university system. And finally, don't forget those newspapers and yearbooks, my favorite for finding your ancestors. And this is just an idea for you to begin your search. You may have a number of ancestors who've attended school, very fortunate to know that. And if you wanted to, you can use this form just to indicate, just to keep up with the schools they may have attended. And you can use a sheet by sheet form here, or if you think it's just a few ancestors you're looking at, you can combine them. But it's the same thing that I've just completed the discussion with you. And that is just to go over where they may have attended and how they may have attended. So what I'll do is I'm going to stop for now so that we can get to the second clip of what really motivated me for today's session, and that is the imprisonment of our ancestors, as I had an up close and personal look at a couple of the slave castles that were in Ghana, and this one in particular is in Elmina. So we will continue on, and we look forward to all of your questions and working with you with Good Genes Genealogy. I'm Ann Kimbrough, and for now, I'm signing off. Thank you.
While researching for an African diasporan family, I ran into special challenges that many beginners and novice ancestral story seekers may also face. The enslaver's son and an enslaved man were born the same year and had the same name. The enslaver owned plantations in two different states, North Carolina and Louisiana. Both of these situations can slow down research and make the puzzle pieces harder to fit together. My check it twice approach. When this happens, I do what I call my St. Nick and Show Me State review. Like Santa Claus, I make a list and check it twice, sometimes more. Like Missouri, the Show Me State, I make sure the documents prove the story before I connect the dots. This means I don't rely only on census records. I dig deeper into newspapers for sales, obituaries, or runaway notices, church records, baptisms, marriages, funerals, plantation diaries and letters, probate records, wills and estate inventories, and slave schedules from 1850 and 1860, which list only age and gender, not names. These extra sources help me separate individuals who at first glance might look like the same person.